Hey, I'm Dan Harris. I am a fidgety, skeptical newsman who had a panic attack live on Good Morning America.
To prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
That led me to something I always thought was ridiculous, meditation. I wrote a book about it, launched an app, and now I'm starting this podcast to try to figure out if there's anything beyond 10%. Basically, here's what I'm obsessed with. Can you be an ambitious person who is nonetheless striving for enlightenment, whatever that means? Let's start the show. Hey, it's Dan. Our guest today, or my guest today, I guess I can say it's my guest today because it's kind of like my show, is Brian Koppelman. He is the co-creator of the new show on Showtime called Billions, which is a great show. If you're not watching it, you should be. He's also written a bunch of movies like Rounders, which is a cult classic, Ocean's 13, Runner. He's also, and this is important given the context, a meditator. And meditation shows up really prominently in Billions, where in the first episode you see two of the main characters. One is a hedge fund billionaire, and the other is the U.S. attorney who's out to get him. Both of them meditate. So, Brian, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
It's my real pleasure to be here, man.
I just met you a couple minutes ago. I already really like you.
Yeah, we're like best friends.
We could be friends.
Great. Yeah,
we actually could be friends.
Well, you have the same drum kit that I can't have. and I don't know if people can, if you swing the camera around, you can't. But there's an electronic drum kit here.
There is. So we're in my office. I should have said that at the beginning. We're in my office, which is the first time we're doing a podcast/vodcast in my office, and I have an electronic drum kit. That makes me look 75,000 times cooler than I actually am, because the truth is I've never played it, because until today it was blocked off by like boxes and pictures, which in anticipation of your arrival we actually hung up the pictures.
I just love the idea that you have it, because it says something about exactly the right kind of aspiration for how you want to spend your day. Like even if you never can, the idea that it's possible that you could put the headphones on, crank up Back in Black, and try to play it in your office at ABC News is awesome.
But doesn't it kind of suggest that I'm like really not into actually working?
No, it's the right kind of silly, right? For a meditator, it's the right kind of silliness. I think the sort of Dada spirit of that is really a good thing. And no, I think there's no question that you need, in any kind of hard endeavor that requires a certain kind of focused creativity, the opportunity to blow off the exact kind of steam that playing the drums allows you to blow off probably should be required. It shouldn't be something you have to excuse.
I just love that you just added a sheen to my distractedness and laziness that I hope my boss is watching. So let's talk about meditation, because you brought it up, and because this whole show is about meditation. As I said, the two main characters right in the pilot are seen meditating. One is a hedge fund guy, and the other is a U.S. attorney. Why did you have your characters do this?
I mean, for a few different reasons. Story-wise and character-wise, it makes sense, because as you do even a little research into the world of high-performance New York, Greenwich, Westport people, you find that they're chasing. They're chasing, if not inner peace, they're chasing a kind of actualization as performance enhancement. And one of the key things that they seem to look to is meditation. So it fits the world, and it's true to the world. Dave and I David Levine, who's my creative partner, he and I both practice transcendental meditation.
And so does Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Andrew Ross Sorkin is a third co-creator as well. He also does meditation, though. Maybe you have to ask him how
he's told me it's TM. I thought
he does TM, or he certainly has done TM. So we have found tremendous benefit in it, and would go to events in New York occasionally, watch people speak, look at the ways in which people are using meditation now. And, there was this idea that, or there is an idea people carry around, that it'll necessarily make you a kinder person or a gentler person or a more giving person. I mean, in fact, they don't even promise in TM. They make none of those promises. That it'll make you more of the best of what you are is what they promise, which seems like an idea really that really fits the hedge fund world and the world of prosecutors who are driven by the kind of ambition that our characters are driven by.
So I want to talk at length about what meditation does for you, but there are a lot of people, and I hear from them, who are critics of the growing popularization slash commercialization of meditation. And the idea that masters of the universe and people who are complete jerks would be using meditation not to make themselves better, kinder people, but to make themselves better at what they already are. For example, your U.S. attorney character, played by Paul Giamatti, you see him meditating, and in the next scene, he threatens to put his father in handcuffs and arrest him. So this is not making him a kinder person unless his baseline is incredibly low. What is your thought about?
Well, he does say, "I love you, Dad."
He does. He does.
He
right
does
before he
say
threatens.
right before he threatens him, "I love you, Dad."
I'm not sure that's a mitigating detail. But do you have any problem as a guy who meditates with people using meditation just to make themselves more effective, even if they're going to be bad actors in the world?
How should they use it? Well, I mean, we say I'm not comfortable with anyone using anything to be a bad actor in the world, right? But I mean, someone could decide to drink 8 cans of Coca-Cola and go get all hopped up and do something bad. But look, meditation is a tool, and it's a really effective tool. And so someone's going to use that tool to be more of what they are, to help them in their own aims. Now, is it possible that if you really pursue meditation and you are doing TM, so you're doing it 40 minutes a day, that perhaps some thoughts or some feelings of calmness, or that your cortisol levels will adjust to a place where you're just naturally a little less hair trigger? Yeah. Could that be nicer for the people around you? Yes. But I don't think that there's a value, positive or negative, in terms of societal good to any of these things. There's not a societal value to yoga versus doing sprints or Tabata, right? It just has certain Eastern accoutrement that make us think that it must be more peaceful somehow. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. Look, there's philosophy you could read alongside of meditation if you want. There are a ton of other things you can do. But what I've found it to do for many people is just make them more of what they are. Or truer, like a more distilled version.
It's possible that I disagree with you, but I want to think out loud.
I want to understand how.
Yes. Okay.
Tell me.
I'm not sure. So let me think out loud. But before I think out loud, I think it might be useful to define terms, because you're talking about transcendental meditation, which is the type of meditation you do. And just for the uninitiated, I should explain that transcendental meditation is derived from Hinduism, and it was basically invented, if you want to use that word, by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. That name may be familiar to some of our listeners / viewers, because he was the guy who was, for a brief period of time, the spiritual guru to a reasonably well-known rock band known as the Beatles. And so he kind of rocketed to global fame as a consequence of that. So he was teaching transcendental meditation, which again is basically a form of Hindu meditation, which uses a mantra, which is a silent word you repeat to yourself. And as you repeat this word to yourself, often in conjunction with your breath, you can achieve this level of concentrative absorption that allows you to shut out the discursive thinking mind and can put you in touch with sort of levels of calm and even bliss and maybe even creativity that heretofore were unavailable.
But, you're not chasing bliss in TM as you're meditating, right? One of the sort of central tenets of TM is that what happens in that 20-minute period, the way in which you perceive what happens doesn't really matter. So that I am not looking for a blissful state. All I'm looking to do is say that mantra to myself. And if thoughts come, they can exist, and then they'll move past. And I just keep saying the mantra. But what happened to me, and I'm not a spokesman for TM. First of all, I'm an atheist, and I'm like a hardcore atheist. And one of the first things I said when I went to talk about learning this was that the cult-like aspects of any organized meditative group freak me out. But you don't have to believe in any sort of ideas that came from Hinduism. You don't have to believe that the Maharishi had tapped into some mystical thing at all. But you can look at you can look at the EEGs, you can look at the scientific studies that show what happens to cortisol levels when people do this.
Or blood pressure.
Blood pressure, cortisol levels, heart rate, all these things that just happen. And, the controlled studies, I mean, I know you've gone through this stuff, but, if you just sit quietly for 20 minutes, there's some benefit to that and breathe. But if you sit quietly and repeat the mantra, I think there are more tangible benefits that are greater than if you don't. And for me, it was a salve and a way to control anxiety. I found that the physical manifestations of anxiety just dissipated by about 85 or 90%.
That's phenomenal. That's great.
And so that was a gigantic life change, to not feel a fluttering stomach, to not get a stress headache.
Were you a JIA, Jew in agony?
That's pretty good. Well, I'm an atheist, but I am a Jew. I mean, I guess I was raised Jewish, and culturally a Jew.
I didn't make that term up. Some of my Hebrew school friends.
When a fascistic leader comes to power and decides to kill the Jews, he'll kill me, whether I identify as Jew or not.
Fair
so
enough.
Yes, I guess by that definition, I am. No, whatever the anxieties are, being someone trying to make a living in show business, or more to the point, like a parent who loves his kids, any kind of outsized worry that I might have, it doesn't mean I don't still have concerns, right? Or I don't still worry, as we all do. I'm not still aware of the thin existential situation we all find ourselves in. But the physical manifestations, the actual sort of way that I walk through the world and feel, changed a dramatic amount when I started meditating after probably 3 weeks of meditating.
So just back to the sort of clarification of terms. When I described TM, I've never really done TM. So when I described it, did I describe it more or less accurately?
Yeah, 20 minutes. 20 minutes twice a day, as soon as you wake up in the morning, and then at some point in the afternoon before dinner. I sit quietly, close my eyes, and repeat a mantra for about 20 minutes.
And so the difference in this sort of goes back to what I was saying before about how maybe I disagree with you, but I want to kind of talk it out. The difference is that the kind of meditation I practice is called mindfulness meditation, which is derived not from Hinduism but from Buddhism. And actually, to be honest with you, I'm a Buddhist, right? But that kind of means more and less than you might think. I mean, I don't view Buddhism as a religion. It is practiced as a religion by some people, but I believe Buddhism is something to do, not something to believe in. And I don't know if I call myself an atheist, but more like a respectful agnostic. So I don't believe in anything I can't prove. Although I'm willing to entertain other people's arguments on behalf of those unprovable metaphysical claims. So in Buddhism, in fact, the argument is that that there is an ethical component, but the interesting thing about it is not a finger-wagging ethical component. It is that if you act like a jerk, we're not allowed to swear here, so the words I would use otherwise I can't use, but if you act like a jerk, it screws up your meditation practice because it's very hard to concentrate when you're trying to keep your lies straight or dealing with a large amount of remorse.
So we dramatize that on the show. There's a moment in the show, a couple episodes in, where Damian Lewis, it's our version of the king trying to pray in Hamlet, which is not a strictly Buddhist text, but I think has the same idea
universal
attached
stuff.
to it,
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
Hamlet, and so when there's Damian Lewis's character Bobby Axelrod is in a particularly tight spot, he is trying to meditate and he can't, and you see it. So yes, of course, your life bleeds into your meditation practice. Your meditation practice bleeds into your life, but what I don't like is the fake spirituality that gets grafted on to this kind of practice. So that I don't agree with this idea that if you meditate, you will become a better person, a more spiritual person, whatever that means. So for me, it's simpler. Like the more I can reduce this stuff down and distill it, the more you can make these things simpler. It's basically breathing with some stuff attached to it. It'll probably make you feel better. If it makes you feel better, maybe it'll be nicer to people. Wouldn't that be great? But I don't think you can say it's going to make people nicer. It's like, you know what? If you have less anxiety and most people, given less stress, less anxiety, clearer thought are going to act like better versions of themselves. But I don't think you can promise it.
I think I would agree with that like 98%. I would give that a huge amen. The only thing I would say is that there is a difference between, and I don't fully understand this because, again, I don't know enough about TM to speak about it with authority, so I want to be clear about that. But my understanding about the difference between TM and mindfulness is that mindfulness goes with extreme prejudice at mindfulness, which is lowered emotional reactivity. And while I believe there's a huge mindfulness component to TM, because every time you notice that you're thinking and you just notice that these are just
It
thoughts,
makes you
and you go back,
it does make you much
mindful.
less reactive, for
Absolutely,
sure.
because you see that the voice in your head is just like just a compulsive
Well, you know, when
liar.
they look at the EEGs, the mindfulness lights up these certain parts of the brain that are targeted towards empathy, and TM lights up a broader area. So it includes that area, but absolutely fires other things as well. Yeah. Many friends of mine practice mindfulness. What drew you to that practice as opposed to TM or one of the others?
The science. There's definitely some science around TM that appears to be quite good. I mean, look, I think, in fact, all of the science around meditation needs to be delivered with a big grain of salt because it's in danger at times of being hyped. Because it's really in its early stages. But having issued that caveat, I think most of the science has really been done around mindfulness. And initially, what I liked about mindfulness meditation was it is really thoroughly secularized, whereas TM is associated with a sectarian organization, is promulgated by the Maharishi. And so for me, as a pretty hardcore, I was raised by scientists, I'm married to a scientist, mindfulness seemed like the more interesting thing. Also, I was reading a lot about Buddhism, and I thought that the philosophy, the sort of intellectual infrastructure of Buddhism, was really compelling. So I was also drawn to Buddhist meditation.
Yeah.
But I'm not as snobbish about it. I actually think mental exercise of whatever variety you choose you should do.
Yeah, I just knew I needed the technology. Like I needed some access to it. And TM, I had friends who'd done it. Friends of mine introduced me to Bob Roth, who runs the David Lynch Foundation. I'd read David Lynch's book, really, Catching the Big Fish. And his book really spoke about the connection between his art and meditation in a way that was incredibly compelling. And that and a few other things, Russell Simmons' book as well. Russell, who'd lived this really big, kind of crazy life, really saw huge changes and became, by his own account, a much better person through TM. And he also had studied with Bob Roth from the David Lynch Foundation. And so I got in a room with Bobby, and I asked him all these questions, about its ties to religion. And they really, they no longer really draw that connection. They draw the connection to Maharishi definitely brought it to America, and they love him and regard him. But they do view it as a technology that he figured out. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, you asked me why I was drawn to mindfulness over TM. Those are the reasons why at the time, 6 years ago. But I don't have a dim view
I did
of
a
the
one
practice.
Tony Robbins does that thing, the one meditation that he brought over from India. I did that once with Tony, and that was a really great experience too. But TM as a repeat for me is like a practice I can repeat. Siddhartha is one of my favorite books, and the idea of the Buddhist kiss and that kind of enlightenment, because I know you're interested in this idea of enlightenment, is really compelling. It just seems like a lot to get there, and you got to go out to the river, and there's just a lot of stuff. You have to be hungry for a long time.
It's a lot.
There's a lot of stuff that has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't even. I'm in this weird position of being interested in pursuing something, enlightenment, that I don't even know if it's real. So it's a kind of a funny dilemma, and yet my hair is on fire with curiosity about it.
Who have you met who you think is enlightened?
I've never met anybody who well, actually,
I'm not asking
I've met somebody who claims to be kind of in the area of fully enlightened. My meditation teacher, when you ask him, are you fully enlightened? He's a guy named Joseph Goldstein. He's like a Menschy Jewish guy from here in New York, went to Columbia and joined the Peace Corps, and then ended up like in Thailand finding meditation 50 years ago, and he's been teaching it ever since. he comes from a school of Buddhism where there's these 4 levels of enlightenment, these 4 experiences that you need to have before you're fully enlightened. If you ask him, where are you on this spectrum, he'll say occasionally somewhere between the first and the third. But you didn't ask, you asked about who do I think is actually enlightened. And I have to say that of all the human beings with whom I've ever had contact, Joseph Goldstein is the closest to being sort of behaviorally. He is behavior, attitude, speech are all things that I emulate on my best days. That I just
clarity of thought, cares about what he should care about.
Yes.
Doesn't sweat the stuff that he shouldn't care about.
Yes. I mean, I've seen him on having bad hair days. He would joke that he doesn't have that much hair. I've seen him get mildly persnickety about stuff, but not really that much. And I just the innate, uncontrived integrity to the man is hard to describe. And so to me, that gives me some confidence, even though I'm not sure that enlightenment is real or this whole map that he subscribes to is a real thing. I don't know.
Yeah, as soon as you start, I mean, to me, like as soon as you start laying out a metric by which to measure, I'm checking out. I mean, there's something about that feels like belts in karate or something. And that, nobody who's really good at that stuff ever talked about the moment they went from the blue belt to purple belt or something as the thing, right? The people who really can practice it were on a different kind of continuum that was only about learning and knowledge and mining their abilities. So to me, when I've met people occasionally who seem to really have the ability to be present, because I think you can really just really take it down to, can I exist right here in the present, right now, with my full empathy and all my antenna out and ready to just react, listen, not worry about the consequences from external forces. Can I be right here? That's really challenging, but that's the closest thing that I can imagine to the idea of that kind of enlightenment, which is to live without fear for even those little moments. And so if you can have 2 seconds where you're living without fear of judgment, then you have those. If you can look at somebody else and really be there, because if you can just be present, you'll do the right thing, right? Because you're not thinking about the other stuff. So then you can be really good. You can help. And so there are very few people I've met who really are like that. I mean, there's Teddy in Salinger's short story, but that's not a real person, sadly. He's enlightened.
It's good that you know that.
He's enlightened. I mean, there have been times that I haven't thought so. But to the extent that meditation allows you to string a few more of those moments of presence together, then perhaps it's a road toward that kind of enlightenment. But if you go back to Siddhartha and the idea that the chasing it, right? Govinda's chasing it the whole time. Siddhartha's not chasing it. He's just following in a very present way what feels like the thing he needs to do. And of course, that leads him to it, and it's not something you can share other than by a kiss. And so by a kiss that transfers the feeling, not any kind of knowledge that you can gain. So, for some people, it's listening to a great song or reading a book that transports them. And maybe in that little moment that lingers after you finish a great piece of art, there's a moment where you're just right there. And maybe that's the closest to enlightened that we get to be. So whatever ladder you need to climb, whatever that thing is worth trying, I think, as long as the idea of trying doesn't become the thing, right? As long as we remember the goal is to not be trying, it's to just be right here.
Well said, all of that. And it's also possible that there isn't a thing called enlightenment, but there are things called enlightenments. And there may be lots of different experiences. You should
brand and sell those things, man.
I actually think
you
somebody
really
is selling
you
enlightenments.
You should get out there and do it.
I believe my mother-in-law actually gave me them in my Christmas stocking. I married a non-Jew. Anyway, but you raised something and I just want to address, which is you talked about your worry about a map that you wouldn't want to be part of that. So let me just play devil's advocate in defense of the map and the maps, because in the various religious traditions within Buddhism, but also I believe within the mystical strains of the Abrahamic faiths, there are this sort of stepwise progression toward, you can start with a few moments of presence and empathy, but then you can get to protracted periods of it, and then you can have it become not just a state but a trait. And so the argument for the map is that actually you can do things, practices, and that there will be predictable and reliable outcomes. So the maps to which I'm referring don't involve like you have to study with this person, you have to pay X amount of dollars at this point. What they are is simply monastics over 2,600 years have found, and this I find truly fascinating, that if you sit and do the practice in a certain way, certain experiences will happen in your mind reliably and predictably. Again, I don't know if there's any truth to this because I haven't had these experiences. But it is fascinating to me that there's something going on, apparently, in the human mind as a baseline capacity that you can have these experiences if you sit and follow the instructions. And that this has been happening for millennia is a really, really interesting thing. Again, if it's true. So I'm not referring to some sort of chutes and ladders type of thing where you have to study with X person and pay this fee and then X is revealed to you. That's not really what I'm interested in.
No, and even as a skeptic, which I am, like I can read Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within, and I can find the stuff in there that's useful. And I like to look at those things as like, well, is there a discovery that someone's made about like a tool or technique that I can try? And then I'll be able to measure whether it's helpful or it helps me find a direction in my life. And so I definitely look for that stuff. I'm more skeptical of it when it's in the religious sphere because that stuff's been used to every religion has been used to control big groups of people.
I love and share your skepticism. I failed, I think, as a podcast host to do one of the primary things, which is to give our audience a sense of like how you became who you are. So let me just say a few things about your past and then let you pick it up from there. I know that you went to Tufts. You grew up here in New York City. Your dad was
I grew up on Long Island.
Long Island, sorry. Your dad was a music executive?
Yes.
And when you, in college, I understand it, you actually started getting interested in recruiting artists. You discovered Tracy Chapman, if I have that correct?
I did. But no, it wasn't, so I started going to the recording studio with my father when I was a very little boy. It was an incredible thing to get to do. And in fact, there's a little Easter egg in for my dad only in the last episode of Billions. Someone says that Bobby Axelrod has Laura Mars eyes, and my dad produced the theme song from that movie, The Eyes of Laura Mars. And so, and it works great because his eyes are Faye Dunaway eyes. It all worked great. People love the line. But, and I didn't tip it to him, and I got a text from my dad saying, like, I can't believe you put Laura Mars in, which was great. I remember falling asleep before they started recording that on the studio couch, and Jeff Skunk Baxter, one of the great musicians of all time, played this guitar solo at the end of that track, and I was probably 9 years old, and I remember just sitting up and watching him do it over and over again, and it was a mind-blowing experience. But when I was in college, it was at the time that, because I was around music and listening to songs all the time and an obsessed music fan, I learned how to figure out what was good. I learned about what made somebody a good songwriter, a good singer. We would talk about it all the time, and I spent hours and hours listening closely. But then when I was in college, I was very involved in student government, and colleges, particularly in the Northeast, there was a big movement. The endowments were invested, many of them, in companies that did business in South Africa, and this is during apartheid. Mm-hmm. And so I was one of the 2 or 3 people who led the movement on my campus for divestment, which was to get the boards to agree to divest from these companies that were doing business in South Africa, because the endowments were hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever. And in doing that, I organized an all-day boycott of classes and got speakers from all over New England to come and speak. And a friend of mine named Peter Zizzo said there's this folk singer that I might want to go see because she might be great to play at this rally, and I'd like her. And I went to see her, and it was Tracy Chapman. And I broke down in tears watching her perform because my whole life had set me up to recognize what it was that she was able to do. And I mean, she played Talking About a Revolution that night. And so I got Tracy to play the rally, and then spent the next 2.5 years trying to get her to agree to let me record demos with her and to make a record. And then I brought her to New York and introduced her to my dad and got him to fly up. It took a long time, but that did end up becoming that first huge Tracy Chapman album.
And you then spent many years post-college, as I understand it, as an A&R guy.
I was an
right?
A&R guy in the music business. I went to law school at night, and then when I turned 30, I mean, we're skipping steps, but basically when I turned 30, I realized that if I didn't, my first child was born, our first child, Amy and my first child, and I looked at my son, he was 9 months old, and I realized that there was a big lie, which was I was going to tell him to grow up and chase his dreams, and I realized I wasn't chasing mine. I realized I wanted to be an artist, and that if I didn't go out and chase it somehow, if I didn't commit to it, I wouldn't be able to tell him that, look him really in the eye. And I realized I was a block writer. I'd always been a block writer for a long time, and I realized that if you're a blocked writer, it becomes toxic, and that toxicity, when that kind of dream dies, that toxicity spreads, and you end up, I think, becoming toxic to the people around you. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be like a great husband and a great father. And so that's when my best friend and I went into a basement. We agreed to meet in a basement every day, and we wrote our first movie, which was Rounders.
And the research for that movie was involved. You're getting involved.
I was playing a lot of poker.
Yeah, so
years of poker.
Underground poker.
Yeah.
And so how did that?
That was all part of like the realization that I wasn't happy.
I see.
The realization that I wasn't living the life I was supposed to be living was I found myself in my office one night, and I had like gained weight, and I had never been a cigarette smoker my entire life, and I was 29, and I'd never been a cigarette smoker. Suddenly I was like smoking, and I was playing cards like every opportunity I had, and I realized what the problem was. The problem was I wasn't living the life I was supposed to live.
So you've gone on and built a fantastic writing career. So you said that was at 30. You're 49 now.
I'm 49.
So you're
Yeah,
coming
19 years of doing this. Yeah.
And when did the meditation start?
So what I did then when I was 30, I wasn't meditating yet. I was doing something very close to which I still do, which is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which is free writing for a half an hour in the morning, 3 longhand pages where you write anything that you want to write. In fact, you can't censor it. It's not what you want to write. It's just what you happen to write. And so there's something very meditative about that practice, because you are not censored. You're free-flowing. You're not in any way reacting to the words. Anything that comes into your head, you're putting out. And for me, it has a centering effect. And I started taking very long walks. And so I did those things. And that's when I read Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within, to try to figure out why I wanted to do what I wanted to do and how. And I started meditating 5 years ago. Because I felt like the stress and pressure of all this stuff was becoming intrusive. I'm always looking for a way to like fine tune whatever it is that I do as for me as a parent and husband, and then as an artist. And I guess, as I say, when I read that book by David Lynch, and then read Russell's book, and then talked to a few other people, I had the thought that I should really investigate it and try it.
Does it help with creativity, and exactly what is the mechanism by which it helps with creativity?
Well, anxiety and fear to me are the greatest blocks to creativity that I know, because for me, I need to be in a state where I feel free, where I don't feel burdened, and where I don't feel the pull to the monkey mind, right? And to those where I don't feel the pull to that stuff, to reactive thinking. And so it helps because I think, the science says it changes your cortisol levels, and it does all this stuff to make you feel less anxious. And then also I've just found a few different times, and you don't push for it. In fact, it's the opposite, right? You're just saying a mantra. Sometimes I'll be sitting there and like the answer will just show up, or it'll show up 10 minutes later. And I mean, a huge answer to something that happens in the season finale of Billions. Just, I did all the stuff that I always do to generate ideas. And then I remember I just sat down and closed my eyes, and like this whole thing just popped into my head as I was meditating. And
Did you stop meditating, get up?
It's
and
funny.
write it
I
down?
asked Bob Roth the other day, what do you do? And he said, if it's really one of those ideas, you stand up and you write it down, and then you come right back and meditate. Get it out of your head.
Why do you think TM specifically has taken off in such a big way among celebrities, and also like in Hollywood generally?
Well, Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you know Tim
Yeah,
Ferriss.
sure. I don't know him
He's
personally,
a
but I know
friend of
he is.
mine, and he says that it's like 75 or over more than 75% of his guests, and he interviews all these incredibly high achieving people. They do it.
Do TM or meditation?
Meditation, but I think a huge percentage of them do TM. First of all, it's very simple, right? The fear many people have with meditation, mindfulness, is everyone who does that. Most people who do your kind of meditation constantly talk about how hard it is. People who do TM constantly talk about how easy it is.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're not selling because I get nothing by talking about it. It's just easy. And so it's easy. And let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say that you're maybe there's slightly more benefit to you than to me if you're looking at the science or whatever. Maybe mindfulness practiced every day correctly. Let's just say, for the sake of it, gives you 5% more of something.
I don't know that to be true.
I don't even think that that's true. But I'm saying, let's say that it does. The thing is, I know I'm not doing the stuff that I'd have to do the mindfulness. TM, I just have to sit down and say a mantra, and whether I can do it or not doesn't matter. All I have to do is say the mantra to myself. You can't fail at TM. The whole point of it is that you can't fail. The whole way you relax into it is to know I don't have to feel like it was a good meditation. I don't have to succeed at blocking thoughts out. I don't have to notice my breath on my upper lip. I was an actor all through college, and so we did stuff that was similar to mindfulness. You did the breathing stuff, and I hated all of it. TM, I love how I feel afterwards, and I love every part of doing it. It's, look, in our culture, I think we feel like if something's not hard, it's not worth doing, maybe. Or how can I make gain if it's not challenging? TM is great because it's simple to do. You just have to carve the time, and you get results. So I think that's why it catches on.
Also, the fact that Bob Roth, who you've referenced a couple times, is available to he works for the David Lynch Foundation. I've never actually met him, but
you should have him. He'd be a great
I'm
guest
have
for
him
you.
on for sure. I want to reach out to him. He seems like such an interesting guy. But he makes himself available, as far as I understand it, to pretty prominent folks to teach them one-on-one, and I think that has made a big difference.
He does, and his team will. But they're not elitist in that I've walked into that office and Bob is teaching somebody for free who's the furthest thing from famous. Like the whole point of the David Lynch Foundation is, he'll tell you the numbers. Again, I'm the furthest thing from a spokesman for any of it. I've taught hundreds and hundreds of thousands of inner city kids to meditate, and veterans who have post-traumatic syndrome to meditate.
Yeah, in high schools, for sure. Switching gears just slightly, you've mentioned the name Tony Robbins a couple times.
Yes.
And I know you're involved in producing a new documentary that's going to come out about him.
Yeah, Dave and I are executive producers of the documentary. Joe Berlinger, who's a great documentarian, one of the legendary documentarians. He made Some Kind of Monster, and he made the
Metallica movie. Right?
He made the Paradise Lost movies, which are these incredibly important films.
Yeah.
That were really important in figuring out who was really innocent and who was really
the West Memphis 3
guilty in the West Memphis 3 murders. Berlinger made the film. Dave and I just introduced him to Tony.
So what is your view? Because you have established yourself in the course of this interview, I think, in a sort of rock-solid way as a skeptical dude. What is your view of Tony Robbins? I will admit again, I feel like I'm having to admit this a lot in this interview, that he's not somebody about whom I have an encyclopedic knowledge, but I know he does have his critics. So what is your view of him?
We all have our critics.
That's true.
But I think Tony has fewer and fewer critics now, and I think if you see Berlinger's movie, you'll get a really clear sense of what it is that Tony Robbins does. Again, I'm not a spokesman for Tony, but I'm a huge fan.
The walking on coals thing?
Yeah, well, the walking on coals thing, to me, is a metaphor. And he talks a bit about it as metaphor in his events. But that's the performance piece of what he does. What works about what Tony Robbins talks about is to me, he found a way to codify some questions that are really important. I think the easiest way, if you watch his TED Talk, he gave a TED Talk with Al Gore in the audience a few years ago. It's like one of the most popular TED Talks. And if you got, maybe you guys will link to it in the show notes or something. But it'll give you a really clear sense of what it is that he's interested in, which is like human beings and their why, their reason for doing the things that they do, and how he can help you figure out whether you're doing things just reactively or whether you're doing things for an actual reason. And I can tell you there were a few different times in my life where I read something that Tony said, or I listened to something, and I was able to translate it into language that made sense for me and help me to get to the next level at something.
Sounds like it's been.
I mean, I can give you specific little things. They're
Sure.
tiny things. Dave and I were trying to get a movie made called Solitary Man, and which it was very difficult to do. It was a small independent movie. We had Michael Douglas wanting to do it and play the lead. I'd written it. It took me 4 years to write it. Dave and I are going to direct it together. And we'd had this conversation with some agents who said, "Oh, you'll never be able to raise the money for this," and they gave us all these like technical reasons why. And I happened to be listening to a thing where Tony talked about the danger of listening to people who hold themselves out as experts or smarter than you in an area, if it's possible that you're smart enough to like do the research yourself, read up on the thing, and figure out, sort of deconstruct their language and figure out if they're telling the truth or not. So I was like, oh, I can do that. And so I started reading a little bit more about how foreign sales were done. And he talks about ways to sort of remind yourself to take action every day. So I made myself a pair of Nike ID shoes that had the word solitary on them, written 100 times. And I wore them every day until I got the movie greenlit. And I would look at the shoes and they would remind me to do something to move Solitary Man forward. And I called these agents one day and I said, okay, instead of you guys having those conversations, Dave and I are going to go have them. Set us up with meetings with these foreign salespeople. And they were like, they're bankers. You won't know how to talk to them. And I said, no, I'll know how to talk to them. Put me in the room with them. I'll get the money. We'll go make the movie. Within a week of making that call, we had the money because they realized we were going to go do it. Yes, it was hard what they had to do. But rather than be embarrassed by having us do it, they had to go out and figure out how to do it. And that was a direct result of like reading 3 things that the guy had said. Now, I'm not a fan of the walking on coal idea because I think it's possible people miss the metaphor and think it's actually dangerous. But I think that he's helped a lot of people, and I think that the work is has helped me.
And I'm looking forward to watching the movie.
The movie was the best reviewed thing of our career. It was Roger Ebert's year-end best list, the New York Times year-end best list. It was a small movie, an art movie, like I said, but we knew that it was really an important thing to get made, and this really helped us do it.
We only have a couple minutes left. In the remaining minutes, are there any other things that you wish I had asked? Any other projects you want?
Well, I mean, the only other thing I would say is that if people like this kind of conversation, I host a podcast called The Moment, where I have conversations with people that are similar to this about the inflection points, what I call the inflection points in their lives, moments where everything was kind of in the balance. So I'll talk to someone like Seth Meyers about what it feels like to be on the cover of Time and Newsweek, as like Bruce Springsteen before him, or I'll talk to Mario Batali about the night he had an aneurysm and what that changed. And so I'll talk to authors that I love, musicians, and really drill down about how they found the best version of themselves. So it's also in the iTunes store.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to subscribe.
Please
One
do.
last question.
Go.
I was reading something you wrote the other day about the things that you do to kind of put yourself in the zone.
Yeah.
And and we have a lot of things in common because you listed exercise, you listed meditation, but the other thing you mentioned, which is a little obscure and some of our listeners or viewers might not know it, is you mentioned a band called The Hold Steady.
Oh,
Love
yeah.
those guys.
Oh,
they're phenomenal.
Well, so that's the episode of my podcast you should start with, is the episode
Craig
with
Finn.
Craig and Tad. I got both of them in there.
Tad Kubler. So I did a long since deceased / euthanized show about indie rock many years ago, and it was called Amplified, and I had them on, and they were incredibly nice guys, and they're also a great band. So for the video version of this, we can't do it, but for the audio version, we might be able to do this. What's your favorite Hold Steady song that we should play out the show with?
Hood Rat. Hood Rat Friend. I mean, really, probably Sequestered in Memphis, but Hood Rat Friend. Hood Rat Friend, because people don't know that song.
It's a great
and
song.
it's a great one. I mean, I could have said How Resurrection Really Feels, but what's yours?
The Swish.
Right, sure.
Right from the second song of the first
yeah.
album. Phenomenal song.
Almost killed me, man. The Hold Steady almost killed me.
My friend, my new friend,
Yeah,
thank you very much
absolutely.
for doing this. You were a phenomenal guest.
What a pleasure. Great to talk to you about this, and I'm really glad you're doing this research. Tell me what you find.
As soon as I find out. Everybody watch Billions. Everybody check out The Moment. Thank you again, Brian. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
Okay.